Cleopatra VII Philopator, the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt, was a woman whose beauty, intelligence, and ambition made her one of the most captivating figures in world history. Her name has become synonymous with power, romance, and tragedy. A queen whose charm shook the foundations of Rome itself. Born into a dynasty of Greek rulers descended from one of Alexander the Great's generals, Cleopatra inherited a kingdom in decline, plagued by corruption, civil war, and the growing shadow of Roman expansion. Yet through her political brilliance and indomitable will, she transformed herself from a young queen fighting for survival into a woman who stood at the center of the ancient world's greatest empire. Cleopatra was born in 69 BCE in Alexandria, the grand capital of Egypt, founded by Alexander the Great. Though she was Macedonian Greek by blood, Cleopatra was the first of her dynasty to fully embrace Egyptian culture. Unlike her Ptolemaic ancestors who ruled from afar, she learned the Egyptian language, worshipped native gods, and presented herself as the reincarnation of the goddess Isis. This connection to Egypt's ancient heritage made her beloved among her people, who saw her not merely as a foreign ruler, but as a true pharaoh, divine, wise, and destined to protect her land. From a young age, Cleopatra displayed keen intellect and charisma. She was fluent in several languages, adept in mathematics, philosophy, astronomy, and politics, and had a remarkable ability to read and influence people, qualities that would later make her one of history's greatest political operators. When her father, Ptolemy XII Auletes, died in 51 BCE, Cleopatra ascended the throne at the age of 18, co-ruling with her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, as was the Ptolemaic custom. However, the joint rule quickly deteriorated. The young king's advisors sought to exclude Cleopatra from power, and within a few years, she was forced into exile. Egypt at that time was both wealthy and strategically important, and Rome had long been involved in its affairs, using it as a source of grain and gold. Cleopatra, exiled and desperate, saw an opportunity in the arrival of one of Rome's most powerful men, Julius Caesar. In 48 BCE, Julius Caesar arrived in Alexandria, chasing his rival Pompey during the Roman Civil War. Cleopatra, ever resourceful, devised a daring plan to meet him secretly. In one of the most famous episodes of ancient history, she had herself smuggled into Caesar's quarters, rolled inside a carpet. When the carpet was unrolled, the astonished Caesar found himself face to face with the exiled Queen of Egypt. Cleopatra's beauty and intelligence immediately captivated him. But more than romance, their relationship was one of mutual political necessity. Caesar needed Egypt's wealth and loyalty. Cleopatra needed Roman support to regain her throne. Together, they defeated Ptolemy XIII's forces in the Battle of the Nile in 47 BCE, restoring Cleopatra to power as queen. Their alliance soon became deeply personal. Cleopatra bore Caesar a son, Ptolemy XV Philometor Caesar, known as Caesarion, meaning Little Caesar. She traveled with Caesar to Rome, where she lived for several years in a villa outside the city. Her presence caused both fascination and scandal among the Romans. Many were captivated by her exotic beauty and regal bearing, but others saw her as a dangerous seductress who had ensnared their leader. When Caesar was assassinated in 44 BCE, Cleopatra's dream of securing her son's future as his heir was shattered. She returned to Egypt, once again alone, but far from defeated. After Caesar's death, Rome plunged into another civil war, this time between his assassins and his avengers, Mark Antony, Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, and Lepidus. As power shifted and alliances crumbled, Cleopatra once again positioned herself at the center of the struggle. In 41 BCE, Mark Antony summoned her to Tarsus to explain her loyalty to Caesar's memory and her role in the eastern provinces. Cleopatra arrived not as a supplicant, but as a goddess, sailing up the Cydnus River in a golden barge adorned with purple sails and silver oars. She presented herself as the living incarnation of Aphrodite, the goddess of love. Antony, a man of immense ambition and appetite, was utterly enchanted. Their meeting marks the beginning of one of history's most famous love affairs. Cleopatra and Antony were drawn together by passion, but their relationship was also deeply political. Antony needed Egypt's wealth to finance his campaigns against Parthia, while Cleopatra sought to restore the glories of her kingdom and ensure her family's survival. Their partnership symbolized the union of East and West, Egypt's ancient mystique intertwined with Rome's military power. Together, they ruled as a royal couple, hosting lavish feasts, forming political alliances, and even presenting themselves as divine rulers. Antony as Dionysus, god of wine, and Cleopatra as Isis. For Egypt, these years were a brief renaissance of prosperity and splendor. However, in Rome, Antony's bond with Cleopatra became a weapon for his rivals. Octavian, Caesar's heir and future Emperor Augustus, portrayed Antony as a traitor bewitched by an Eastern queen, a man who had abandoned his Roman virtue for the luxuries of Alexandria. Roman propaganda painted Cleopatra as a temptress who sought to enslave Rome through her beauty and cunning. When Antony divorced Octavian's sister, Octavia, to live permanently with Cleopatra, the break between the two men became irreversible. In 32 BCE, Octavian declared war not on Antony, but on Cleopatra, casting the conflict as a defense of Rome against a foreign threat. The final act of Cleopatra's story unfolded in tragedy. In 31 BCE, Antony and Cleopatra's combined forces faced Octavian's navy at the Battle of Actium, off the western coast of Greece. Cleopatra commanded her own fleet, but the battle turned into disaster. Surrounded and outmaneuvered, Cleopatra and Antony fled back to Egypt, their armies disintegrating. Octavian pursued them relentlessly. By 30 BCE, he reached Alexandria. In their last moments, Antony and Cleopatra's world collapsed. Believing Cleopatra dead, Antony fell on his sword. Mortally wounded, he was brought to her, and in one of the most poignant scenes of antiquity, he died in her arms, declaring his love and loyalty to the end. Cleopatra's fate was sealed. Octavian entered Alexandria victorious. The queen, realizing that she would be paraded through Rome as a captive, chose to die on her own terms. According to legend, she arranged for a poisonous asp, a symbol of divine royalty, to be smuggled into her chamber. Allowing it to bite her, Cleopatra died at the age of 39, draped in royal robes, lying on a golden couch, her beauty untouched even in death. With her passing, Egypt fell under Roman rule, marking the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty and the beginning of the Roman Empire's domination of the ancient world. Cleopatra's death was not merely the end of a queen, but the close of an era. She had been the last pharaoh of Egypt, the last ruler to speak for a civilization that had endured for over 3,000 years. Her reign embodied the struggle between East and West, independence and empire, tradition and change. To her people, she was the embodiment of Egypt's pride, a ruler who dared to stand against Rome and assert her sovereignty. To the Romans, she was both fascination and fear, the woman who nearly divided their republic and conquered two of its greatest men, not with armies, but with her wit and will. Over the centuries, Cleopatra's image has been reshaped countless times. The ancient Roman historians, writing under Augustus, portrayed her as a seductress whose ambition destroyed noble men. Later generations saw her as a symbol of feminine power, intellect, and resistance. Renaissance artists painted her as a tragic heroine. Poets immortalized her death as the ultimate act of dignity. In modern times, she has been reimagined as both a feminist icon and a cautionary legend. But beyond the myths and legends, Cleopatra was above all a ruler, one who navigated the treacherous tides of politics with extraordinary intelligence. She used every tool available to her: diplomacy, culture, alliance, and yes, love, to protect her throne and her people. Cleopatra's influence extended beyond her lifetime. The child she bore with Caesar, Caesarion, was briefly proclaimed Pharaoh, but was soon executed on Octavian's orders. With him died the last bloodline of Alexander's empire. Yet Cleopatra's legacy lived on in art, literature, and memory. Her story captured the imagination of Shakespeare, who immortalized her in Antony and Cleopatra, portraying her as age cannot wither her, nor custom stale her infinite variety. Hollywood would later enshrine her as the ultimate symbol of allure and power in films such as Cleopatra in 1963, with Elizabeth Taylor's portrayal defining her for a new era. What truly made Cleopatra remarkable was not her beauty, though legends often exaggerate it, but her mind. She was a master of persuasion, an eloquent speaker, a shrewd economist, and a strategist who held her own against Rome's greatest leaders. She maintained Egypt's independence for nearly 2 decades, amid the rise of one of the most powerful empires in history. She modernized the administration, stabilized the economy, and protected her nation's culture and religion at a time when others were losing their sovereignty. Even as she engaged in love affairs with Caesar and Antony, she remained a ruler first, driven by the survival of her people and her dynasty. In the end, Cleopatra's story is not simply one of romance or tragedy. It is one of courage, intellect, and resilience. She lived in a man's world, surrounded by generals, politicians, and emperors, and yet she commanded their respect and desire. She used her wit as her weapon, her voice as her sword, and her vision as her crown. Through the force of her personality, Cleopatra shook Rome not because of her beauty, but because she challenged its supremacy. She dared to imagine an Egypt that could stand as Rome's equal, not its servant. Her death marked the victory of empire, but her memory endures as the eternal queen, one who defied the world's mightiest power with nothing but her brilliance and her will. More than 2,000 years later, her story continues to fascinate because it captures the timeless human struggle between love and duty, ambition and destiny, life and legend. Cleopatra, the queen who shook Rome, remains not merely a figure of history, but a symbol of what it means to